Hello podcast enthusiasts, thank you for tuning in to what we call a female view about history. In today's episode we will be discussing what we consider is the point of no return in the Malvinas War. So whether you are a seasoned listener or a newcomer to the podcast world, get ready to ignite your curiosity and expand your horizons with us. According to what we said in the previous episode, there was an instant, a point during the Malvinas conflict from which there was no option but the war. So, to immerse ourselves in what concerns us, we have to remember that the Malvinas Islands are of great interest due to their strategic location. This geopolitical importance is because of two main reasons. The Interoceanic Canal, which connects the Atlantic Ocean with the Pacific, and the Antarctic Treaty.
Exactly, Barbie. The Interoceanic Canal works as a passage for a huge amount of commerce traffic. Besides, regarding the Antarctic projection, we have to mention that this continent covers an area close to 14 million square kilometers, and only 1% of this territory is free of ice. For this reason, we can say it is considered the coldest and driest continent with the largest reserve of fresh water in the world. For those who don't know, some feature resources include an abundance of edible algae, more than 200 species of fish, and the discovery of iron and copper. And as if that wasn't enough, its geographical location allows air communications through intercontinental transpolar routes.
Absolutely. It's crucial to recognize the significance of those natural resources, water reserves and biodiversity, to comprehend the British territorial claim in Antarctica and the importance of the islands. This is precisely why the ongoing dispute over the sovereignty of the Malvinas has involved not just Great Britain, but also the US, as you can imagine.
Yes, well, shocking, isn't it? However, Anna, there's something I want to discuss, because it's not that widely known that during Galtieri's time in office, there were numerous negotiation opportunities, proposals on the table, but we, Argentina, refused to accept every single one. And it's pretty intriguing to think about what might have happened if Argentina had accepted. Don't you all think?
Definitely. If Argentina hadn't displayed such national pride, we probably would be talking about a very different outcome. So, let's try to uncover how and when we reached the point of no return.
Let's give you an insight into the historical landscape of the 1980s. During this time, the USA found itself torn between, let's say, two opposing factions. The Atlanticists, led by Haig, who wanted to reestablish relations with the NATO, and the Continentalists, led by Kirkpatrick, who wanted to break the treaty with Europe and reinforce the Continental Alliance.
Also, we need to point out Galtieri's strong ties with Kirkpatrick, which made Argentina gain support from the US. But at the same time, this situation created tension between the US and Great Britain, who believed that Argentina had their consent to take the Malvinas back.
Right, and this simply put the US on the hook. The thing is that Great Britain was asking them permission to attack because they weren't allowed due to the Monroe Doctrine. America for the Americans, remember? So, to ease this situation, Hayes stepped in as a mediator. Once he became an intermediary, there were lots of attempts to offer guidance, and numerous treaties were proposed in order to facilitate a resolution in which Argentina could have somewhat come out well. But guess what? We didn't accept any of them.
Yes, exactly. And here's the kicker. Galtieri, even before he became president, was already talking about his worries regarding the islands and hinting at reclaiming them through military action.
Alright girls, I think we can now introduce to the listener the central topic of this episode. Don't you think? It's time to dive deep into the topic, the point of no return.
Let's go for it.
Upon Argentina's refusals, Hague stepped out of the mediation. That's when President Reagan decided to take the matter into his own hands and proposed the Three-Flag Treaty, which aimed at the shared administration between the USA, Britain and Argentina. After that, the UN will decide which country will get the island's sovereignty.
The thing is that the British didn't like this settlement because of the decolonizer character the UN had adopted since World War II, that to their belief would mean Argentina's sovereignty over the islands. But at the same time, they couldn't decline a proposal coming from the US, so instead they made us do it.
And how did they achieve that?
Well, they achieved that by sinking the Belgrano cruise on May the 2nd, coincidentally the same day Argentina had to give its answer about the Three-Flag Treaty.
Right, so after this happened, we could have been more insightful, or, well, should have been more insightful, let's say, but Altieri decided to respond by drowning the British cruiser with the excuse of defending Argentina's stained honor. And actually, to this day, it is said that this was done with the assistance of the US.
Right, then if both countries' honor had been stained, they were on a level playing field, right?
Exactly. And that's when the US tried to renegotiate, actually. There was even another proposal introduced by Kirkpatrick, which would involve a trust. This meant a co-administration, and after 20 years, Argentina would get the islands back. But still, we remained obstinate and declined it. This is what we consider the no returning point.
And finally, in a critical turn of events, the conflict reached its climax when Argentina's Minister of Foreign Affairs Nicanor Costa sought help from Cuba, and subsequently Moscow, fracturing relationships with the US. Soon, the Anglo-Saxon nation openly backed Great Britain in the war. As a result, on June 14th, Argentinian soldiers surrendered, returning the islands to British control.
However, for the soldiers returning home, the battle was far from over, and what is known as the demobilization process took place. But what does that mean?
So, what this process suggests is that in order to preserve democracy and prevent the dictatorship from being reestablished, Argentine society should forget the war. Thus, when the soldiers arrived at the Campo de Mayo base in Buenos Aires, they were forced to sign a pact of silence.
Yes, that's right. But let's not forget the media, because the media also play an important role in this process by avoiding any mention of the war and focusing on its aftermath instead. However, nothing is forgotten unless people choose to forget. So, Mariana, can you talk us through the impact that this process had on our society?
It was a real struggle for people during that time because it was difficult to denounce the dictatorship and the systematic violation of human rights, and at the same time claim sovereignty over the islands without being pointed as people who wanted to vindicate the dictatorship.
So, whether this disconnection from the islands was imposed or not, the issue was left behind, let's say. A lack of emotional engagement or acknowledgement of the significance of the islands therefore diminishes the urgency or importance of the retrieval.
Could we be discussing yet another crucial stage for the point of non-return? I mean, after all, if society wants nothing to do with it, claiming sovereignty is really not an option. Don't you think?
Indeed, she said. If there wasn't an urge to get the islands back, what was the point? Also, a very important matter, what happened to the soldiers?
Well, the soldiers who survived were seen as los loquitos de la guerra. They didn't have psychological nor financial support, making it difficult for them to find a job and continue with their lives. As a consequence, many of them took their own lives.
Well, this was sure a lot to digest, especially taking into consideration that this is not the side of the history that many of us were taught back in school.
Definitely, Marian. I'm honestly not surprised at all to see that this war was just a political pawn for the Britons and the US to get their hands on our natural resources.
Me neither, Barbie. It's interesting how this war did not only affect our society, but also got in the way of many political agendas around the world, mainly the USA.
What's more, we must also mention that Argentina's diplomatic decisions left a lot to be desired, from Hayes' attempts to reach an agreement to the alliance with Cuba.
And what's with the Desmalvinization process? It's sad to see how people who fought for our nation were treated in such an awful way.
Indeed, one cannot avoid thinking how important it is for us, as Argentines, to know this side of the history as well.
That's right, because as the saying goes, a nation without memory is condemned to make the same mistakes again. Not giving the honors that the soldiers deserved, mixing patriotism with advocacy of dictatorship, and trying to delay the memory of the nation is going to lead us to a new point of no return. It's time to open our eyes and reassert the claim over the islands, because the Malvinas were, are, and are going to be Argentinian forever.
This information was taken from the podcast Geopolítica en Acción, from the YouTube video on Demalvinization by FM en Tránsito, and the paper de la desmalvinización a la regionalización del reclamo argentino por la soberanía sobre las Islas Malvinas by María Verónica Picone y Marcelo Mangini. Thank you for listening.